Run the crossroads of the Ozarks. This is P.I.D. Radio. Welcome. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and I've got my old P.I.D. radio hat right here.
Ooh, but we've got new ones.
I know, but this is the original.
That's the classic.
This is the OG.
That's P.I.D. Classic.
I know.
Yeah.
I know, but brand new ones.
Yes, we'll tell you how you can get your very own P.I.D. radio cap.
I can get another one?
Yes.
What?
Yeah, we got one back in the house, but
I
need to get one for everyday wear. That one's for like display purposes only.
And by the way, someone caught that a GHTV hat was sitting in the background of an interview that you posted.
Yeah, well, it was a 5 in 10. It was a brief update that I did earlier this week. I caught it. I was muted. You were muted.
I was blowing my nose. My nose is dripping. It's that change of seasons.
And it's really, really dry here in the Ozarks.
Oh, boy, howdy is it.
If I'm sounding a little husky this morning, it's because it's been affecting me. I get like minor asthma.
You're full
husky. Really, yeah, there you go. It's not a big deal. Easily controlled with over-the-counter stuff, but it does get to... I was doing a program last night with Gabriel Bello, who's a friend of our good friend Rudy Landa. He's a jazz musician, committed Christian, friends of the Goslings, Nick and Jonathan Goss.
Yeah, we love those guys.
And so did a live stream with him, and boy, I was trying really hard not to cough because my lungs were just saying, we've got extra stuff in here we need to get rid of.
Well, and to add to things, you were still going through some of your mother's stored items, and you went through a wardrobe that had lots of clothing in it that had been in there for decades. Not in there, but it had been in storage for decades. And so because of that, who knows what sort of stuff is in it. I'm in the midst of cleaning it all. And yes, I even wash wools. Yeah, and amazingly, they don't shrink, but I wash in cold. I dry on very, very low. So I take very good care of the woolen products, but you got to get the stuff out of them.
Right. Yeah. They've been in that storage unit for at least 7 years, and they were probably, I'm not sure when they were put in those wardrobe boxes. The things that came out of the plastic storage boxes that we had before, I'm pretty sure those had been in storage since Mom and Dad moved from Chicago to South Carolina back in 2001.
Yep. Well, look at
the things in these boxes. Probably
I was watching for spiders.
Yeah. Brown recluse sanctuary.
Yep. Only found one. So thank you, Lord.
That's good.
Yep.
So anyway, thank you for joining us. Please take a moment and download our app so you get all of our content right to your device, smartphone or tablet. iOS, Android, Amazon Kindle Fire. We've also got the TV versions. If you've got a set-top box like Roku, Apple TV, now Amazon Fire Stick or Fire TV, we've got an app for that as well.
So basically, people can't get away from us.
That's right. We are taking over one device at a time.
One bite at a time. Yes. Well,
Gilbert
how do you take over the internet?
One bite at a time. PIDradio.com/app or gilberthouse.org/app.
Well, we've had an interesting week, and we'll tell you all about that towards the end of this session. But I want to get started with some stuff that, this morning I decided to take a look at what's going on in the news, of course. And one of those is that Blinken, who is our, I don't know what he thinks he is. He's foreign secretary equivalent.
Secretary of State.
Yes, exactly. No, I don't know what he is. He's blinking all the time. Don't ask me. He keeps going to these countries and pretending to do things. I think he's just posing. But Blinken announced that he, on behalf of the United States, the Biden administration, the administration was going to, sanction Iran yet again. I know.
How could there be anything left that we haven't already sanctioned?
I know. And then some of them were lifted and we gave them a bunch of money. But here's the thing. Because of that, I started looking at news out of Iran, which is, as with news out of any country, the country serving up the news about itself is generally full of propaganda.
Sure.
And of course, this is too. But this is not propaganda. The headline is, leaders from 24 nations confirm their desire to participate in BRICS. Now, Iran is a big member of BRICS. So when the United States says we're going to sanction your oil exports, frankly, Iran just goes, and? What? Because you keep doing that, and yet our exports are more than they've ever been.
Right.
Because other countries have stepped in to buy.
Yeah, we talked about this off and on, and I bring it up on 5 and 10 on a fairly regular basis because BRICS, in terms of what they call purchasing power parity, which is the gross domestic product then adjusted for the average cost of goods and services in that country, because you can't compare the price in the United States, for example, with the price of things in Iran and so on. But in terms of purchasing power parity, BRICS now exceeds the G7, which are the 7 leading economic powerhouses in the world: United States, Canada, United Kingdom, Japan, Australia, France, Italy, I think, Germany. So it's they're already doing well. And I think the driver behind this of other nations now wanting to join BRICS has been the United States' use of the dollar, which is the de facto world's reserve currency. Most world transactions, especially oil, are conducted in U.S. dollars. So countries have to hold some of their reserves, their cash, in the form of U.S. dollars so they can buy oil or whatever else they're trying to buy. That has allowed the United States government to print money like crazy because there are always countries out there in the rest of the world that have to soak up dollars, store dollars, which kind of soaks up the excess money. Inflation is not necessarily the amount of money that's been printed, it's the amount of money in circulation, or what they call the velocity of money.
Velociraptor of money.
Yes, exactly, which has rapidly increased since the lockdowns. We were handing out, stimmy checks left and right. Yeah, helicopter money. Helicopters flying over the country, just throwing dollars out to stimulate the economy. That has led to the inflation we've had here in the U.S. and around the world in the last few years. Now, when the United States starts freezing the assets of other countries, using the dollar as a weapon, this discourages those countries from holding dollars and transacting business in dollars. BRICS is offering an alternative. They're working on developing a currency, a sort of a basket currency there, also a digital currency. And besides the fact that they've got a big chunk of the world's natural resources between Russia and some of the new members like the UAE, Saudi Arabia considering membership, Iran, which is now a member, which has large natural gas holdings. You've got and India being a founding member of the group.
Yes, Russia also being a founding member. I just want to throw this in that Russia is chair of BRICS this year, 2024.
Right.
He would like to see priority given to the CIS countries, the Commonwealth of Independent States, which is the former USSR countries. And he includes within that, oddly enough, the Republic of Indonesia,
which is the world's largest
Muslim population.
Muslim country. Right. So that is another nation. Thailand also wanting to join. Vietnam indicating interest. And BRICS is, this just reported Thursday of this week that BRICS is looking at denominating oil settlements, oil sales in the Chinese currency, the yuan. So
petrodollar is on its way out.
The petro yuan would become a new form of currency or a new hedge against the weaponization of the U.S. dollar.
Right.
So between India and China, right there, you've got about 3.3 billion people, which is about 40% of the world's population there.
Right. BRICS, if we forgot to say it, Brazil, Russia, India, China.
And South Africa. Yeah. Those are the founding members.
Which you wouldn't think right off the bat that South Africa would go with those other countries. But apparently it did. In fact, South Africa was the one that took Israel to the international court.
Yeah. So BRICS is developing as an economic powerhouse and an economic bloc as a counterweight on the world's geopolitical stage to NATO and to the G7. And there are a lot of, what was it, some 30-some nations that are indicating interest in joining? 34. So between the natural resources available from
the headline said 24, but if you look in the article, you see 34 as a number down there. So I think what we're seeing is tipping of the balance, tipping of the scales.
Yeah. Yep. And the neocons in the West who are still convinced that we, the United States, is still the world's sole superpower, have been pushing this and pushing these other nations into these alliances. We have forced Russia into an alliance with China. Russia and China has always traditionally been sort of antagonistic to one another.
Yeah, I know. And what I think they will be again.
Yeah.
I do. I think if China manages to sneak in the petro-yuan, that Russia's going to want the petro-ruble. In fact, it was just maybe 15 years ago that they tried to float their own oil bourse and have the petro-ruble.
Yeah. There are, so this is something to watch because the United States has come very close to overplaying his hand. And again, when you mentioned Blinken announcing more sanctions on Iran, it's like we've been sanctioning Iran for years because we keep hearing that Iran is just, X number of weeks or months away from having a nuclear weapon. So we're going to slap more sanctions on them. More sanctions. Now, of course, there were reversals in that policy over the last decade where very infamously the Obama administration sent pallet loads of cash to Iran to try to appease and then reach the nuclear deal with Iran. This was restarted, that negotiation, under the Biden administration, and Naranjo was his name. Gabriel, I think, is his first name. Anyway, he was an advisor to the State Department on dealing with Iran during the Trump administration. He sounded the alarm that the chief negotiator that Biden had put over there in Iran was giving away the store. And this fellow was saying that colleagues that he'd worked with in the State Department were telling him behind the scenes, he's basically conceding on everything that the Iranians want. Well, it turned out now he's under investigation by the FBI. This negotiator, not the guy who was blowing the whistle, but the negotiator was for apparently slipping more information to Iran that is legally allowed. Is not legally allowed, much less geopolitically wise. So, but yeah, BRICS is drawing in more people. Iran is now a member of BRICS, but then you've got Azerbaijan, Malaysia, Thailand have applied for membership. Venezuela wants to become a full member during this coming meeting, and Venezuela's got a
lot of oil.
Venezuela's oil reserves actually surpass those of Saudi Arabia. Mm-hmm. So, yeah, this is becoming a real magnet for nations that are concerned about getting too close to the United States, because the United States blob, the uniparty inside the Beltway, has been just too eager to use the United States dollar and economic warfare to coerce other nations to doing what they want.
Well, let's get away from the economic warfare and talk about the spiritual warfare with this in mind, the spiritual game of risk. It's not a game, but it's comparable to our human game of risk. Nearly all of us have played that at some point. I always lost. Yeah. But the spirit realm, they take it very seriously. Mm-hmm. The Lord God Almighty takes it very seriously. However, he's won long ago. He won this so long ago, and the spirit realm haven't yet figured it out. It's like that chicken with its head cut off.
Yeah.
The chicken just keeps running around. If you've ever done this, it does happen. Not always, but it can happen. It's as if the chicken doesn't know it's dead yet. Mm-hmm. And it's kind of sad.
Yeah.
As a child, I had to see that a lot because we raised our own food. But spiritually speaking, one of the things I'm going to be discussing for the Skywatch virtual conference, and November 30th, I think is when
that's when it goes.
It airs.
Yeah.
Is this idea of transference of spirits from one country to another when you have immigration, whether legal or not, you have immigration. A gang from Venezuela bringing their ideas of society and taking advantage of society, but also whatever spirits are within that gang, they have been coming up to the United States and taking over.
Yeah. Yeah. Tren de Aragua, the gang, the very vicious and ruthless gang. But yeah, I did a program on A View from the Bunker a couple of years ago with Judd Burton about bringing spirits with them, the people who are coming across our southern border and what gods they might be bringing with them.
This is actually connected. But I'm going to start out by telling you that this morning, Derek slept in a little bit later, and we'll explain more about that later, but probably part of it was because you woke up in the middle of the night with a headache.
Yeah.
But so I was watching movies this morning, just sort of Christmas movies. Whether you celebrate Christmas or not, there are lots of movies that play as you approach Thanksgiving, and then between Thanksgiving and January, you see a lot of those films. And one of them I was watching is Harvey, which has nothing to do with Christmas, but it was that sort of, okay, I can watch this in the background. I've seen it many times, but it's an oldie but a goodie. And I love Jimmy Stewart anyway. Well, if you've never seen Harvey, Jimmy Stewart's character has a 6-foot-tall rabbit friend who is invisible to most. It is introduced in the very opening scene to a woman who's in a car, and Jimmy Stewart's explaining, oh, my friend, oh yeah, he's a puka. What? He's a puka. So I had researched this previously, so I decided to go look at it again. Not only are pukas demons, and believed to be so throughout Celtic nations and Germanic nations, but also have rules by which you have to play. You can summon a puka to work on your place, make shoes for you at night, whatever you want to. But you have to feed it, feed the ancestors, feed the Rephaim.
Yeah.
You have to provide it a place, like the dolmens. You have to provide it a place where you feed it. And you're still taking the chance that the puka, which can take various forms, the puka will turn on you. One of the things about a puka, it's similar to a dibuk in that it attaches to the family. And the only way to get rid of it is to sell it on.
Okay.
You can only do that 3 times. Hot potato, last family with it.
Is stuck
and has to give up your soul in exchange for getting rid of it. Again, these are mythologies that are rooted in fact. Spiritual warfare fact.
Right.
If, as with the dibuk, these are attachments that are brought in, it's more than just worshiping them. This thing's hitching a ride.
Spiritual, territorial spirit in the sense that it's attached to a group of people, but not specifically to a land.
Well, exactly. There are some demons that are demons of place. These are demons of bloodlines.
And when we say nation, it's in the sense of the Greek word ethnos in the New Testament. Nation against nation, ethnos against ethnos.
Right.
You've got these ethnicities that are coming in and bringing with them the gods that they worship. Yeah.
Well, think about it. In the Old Testament, we have I think he's a king who had leprosy, and he was down in Jerusalem, and he washed in the Jordan.
Wasn't a king. It was an assistant to the king of Damascus, Aram.
Yes, and, that's exactly where I was picturing in my head.
Right.
And he wanted to take some of the land back with him.
Right.
Because he thought the god of that land was in the dirt.
Well, he knew that Israel was sacred to Yahweh.
Yeah, but he wanted to take that sacred ground back with him.
Right, so that Yahweh would be present with him. Yeah.
As if there's something magical about the dirt. There isn't.
Yeah, there isn't.
But it was a belief.
Right, and getting back to your statement that this is rooted in fact, there is no demon that you sell on 3 times and then you're stuck with it. That's
just the legend.
That's the legend. That's the fake news that the demons tell people to get them to freak out. And
because I'm sorry, free will is everything.
Yeah, but you can cast them out through the power of Jesus Christ.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So immigrants, anyone coming into your, whether crossing your threshold, again, this idea of threshold covenants, they're coming across the threshold of the United States.
Yeah. And we're welcoming them in. Yeah, this has been a very strange period of years. Very strange watching the campaign. Not to take this in a political direction necessarily, but just very interesting watching Kamala Harris running against her own record as the borders are.
She puts the word pain back in campaign.
Yeah, she does. And having to explain that trying to make the case that this is somehow Donald Trump's fault when you look at the numbers of encounters at the border over the last 20 years and how it's spiked since 2021. Like, I'm sorry. You just cannot explain this away and say it's because Donald Trump convinced Republican lawmakers to vote against a bill that would have basically said, okay, all you people who are in here illegally, you're now citizens. It's just that's a joke. It's a joke.
Absolutely.
A sad joke.
Oh my gosh. Well, she recently spoke to a group of Jewish voters and had the audacity to say to them that she would never allow Iran to acquire a nuclear weapon.
She's in a difficult spot because clearly the majority of Americans are pro-Israel.
Yeah.
And want to defend Israel, believe that Israel's got the right to defend itself. I would take that a step farther and say that Israel is on the front line of a religious, a spiritual, and civilizational struggle between Islam and the rest of the world, because Islam is a religion of conquest.
They're holding back that flood.
They are, and they're obsessed with Israel because Israel almost alone. Well, for one thing, it's the place where God has said His name would dwell forever. We were just in our Bible study this past week reading about Solomon's prayer in the new temple that he had constructed and had never noticed before how often it said a temple built for the name of Yahweh. And that's not his reputation. The name in Old Testament context, and this was not just a Jewish thing or an Israelite thing, this was also known to the Canaanites. There's a text, one of the Rephaim texts, that summon the spirits of these Nephilim to the summit of Mount Hermon, the threshing floor of El, the tabernacle of El, where the blessing of the name of El would resurrect the heroes. So the name is an aspect of the deity. It is a person. In fact, there is Mike Heiser wrote an article that's part of the Faith Life Study Bible on name theology, and how that was repurposed by the writers in the New Testament to show how the name is in Jesus, which, more confirmation that Jesus is Yahweh, contrary to a 1900-year-old heresy, 1800-year-old. Anyway, this is a civilizational confrontation taking place in Israel because Islam wants that land because it belongs to the God of Abraham, Isaac, and Jacob. They want it back. There's also this belief among Muslims that once a land has become Muslim, it must always be Muslim. And Israel, almost alone of all the conquests made by Islam in the 7th and 8th centuries, has reclaimed the land. Now, Spain is another one, which is why it's so ironic that Spain has recognized Palestine as a free nation. It's like, I'm sorry, read your history. You guys were under the control of Muslim rulers for 700 years. They want it back. They think it belongs to them. Parts of Eastern Europe and parts of mainland Europe. Yeah, were Muslim. The Crimean War was all about that. Yes. That's why countries like Russia and Hungary are very sensitive to that, even though Russia has been backing Iran and backing the anti-Israeli forces. It's mainly because Russia has been pushed away by the United States. The neocons are saying, no, we're not. I still don't have my head around the spiritual war between the God of the West, the UK and the United States, and whatever territorial spirit controls Russia. Because just looking at it from a logical geopolitical sense, we've got a lot more in common than we do as enemies. And it would make a lot of sense if Russia were part of the bloc, including NATO and the West. I think it's about the spiritual game of risk that is being played. Yeah. In order to set up the false Messiah, the Antichrist, as Christ, he would have to come at the end of Armageddon, which brings down Gog, king of the north, which you and I believe is actually a reference to a spirit being. Yes. Gog is the Old Testament conception of the Antichrist. And the north is actually in Turkey. It's not Putin. But if you want to make it seem like it's Russia, as some scholars are believing, then you have to set him up as the boogeyman. Exactly. And there are a lot of Bible teachers that we really respect who just sort of take the Gog is Russia or Magog is Russia as a given, including, Chuck Missler, Tom Horn, Arnold Fruchtenbaum.
I think Tom was moving away from that, though, before he passed away. You and I had many conversations with him, and he just, that makes sense.
Because this was something that Mike Heiser pointed out.
Exactly.
North in Hebrew, Tzaphon, refers to Mount Tzaphon, which was the mountain that was sacred to Baal,
yes,
who was the storm god, who Jesus identified as Satan. In other words, it's a supernatural north or a cosmic north, if you will, because this is a supernatural war. The war of Gog and Magog, the war that ends at Armageddon. That is a supernatural war with supernatural players in it. That's one of the things I talked about with Gabriel Bello on his program yesterday. I'll have to find the link. I will make myself a note. Find the link.
Notes.
Yep. Streamed live to his YouTube channel, because I talked about this last night, how the Nephilim and the Rephaim, and the difference between those two is that the Nephilim is the term used for the pre-flood giants as they walked the earth. The Rephaim are their spirits. Afterward, there were tribes that were referred to as Rephaim. In our view, that's because they venerated or worshipped the Rephaim, which we know took place among the Canaanites, because there are Canaanite texts that say so explicitly.
By the way, some of the Nordic puka, the equivalent to the puka, were giants, and they were cannibals.
Really?
And they had as many as 6 fingers.
Well, that's not a coincidence.
No.
So Gabriel asked a really important question. Why is this relevant to us? And I pointed to Ezekiel 39, verse 11, because that's the end of the war of Gog and Magog, where God says he's setting aside a place for burial in the valley of the travelers east of the sea, and it will block the travelers. Verse, let me bring this up here so I'm not messing it up out of memory. On that day, which is a phrase in the Old Testament that means the day of Yahweh, the day of the Lord, when he comes and fights on the battlefield. In other words, Armageddon. On that day, I will give to Gog a place for burial in Israel, the valley of the travelers east of the sea. It will block the travelers. And travelers was a word used by the Canaanites to refer to the spirits of the Rephaim. So it would appear that you've got these demonic spirits of the giants, the Nephilim, who are fighting in the army of Gog, of Magog. In other words, they are the army that comes against Israel at Armageddon.
Now, we probably need to take a break soon.
Yep. Pretty close.
Kind of thought so. Before we go to break, though, I want to bring up something that's connected, but seems like it's not.
Oh, you're good at that.
Well, here's the headline. King Arthur may have been LGBT because he once wore women's clothing, and this is all according to a Welsh council that have included him in LGBTQIA yippee-ki-yay historic figures.
I've done a lot of
I know, so have I. So have I. But I bring this up as connected because we're also seeing, by that I mean I am seeing, lots of headlines lately talking about how Arthur is messianic. He is the Celtic, sort of Anglo-Saxon version of Messiah.
Yeah. I wrote
the once and future king. Yeah. Oh, no. It's why I bring Arthur into the Red Wing saga.
I see.
It's why that's a drumbeat that appears every once in a while.
Yeah. Well, we'll talk about King Arthur, the once and future thing, as P.I.D. Radio continues. Our new book, The Gates of Hell, is available now, and we have a special offer on it at the Gilbert House store.
You're not going to find a deal like this anywhere else. You're going to get the book, which is a $21.95 value. You're going to get 3 DVDs.
More than 12 hours of video content, plus the book for just $45. That's half price.
That's half price because the whole package at retail is over $90.
The Gates of Hell tackles mysteries like where was Jesus baptized and why did he choose to get baptized in a place known as the Land of the Serpent?
Oh my goodness, you want this deal. This is the kind of thing that you can share with your friends, share with your pastor, read again, because trust me, the source information that Derek and I used for this, you're not going to find it anywhere else.
Right. It's not just an archaeological or historical curiosity. It is relevant to us today. Again, a special offer for the month of October only at gilberthouse.org/store.
Shall we begin? Let's begin now.
Welcome back to P.I.D. Radio. I'm Derek Gilbert.
I am Sharon Gilbert, and we want to remind you that we've got lots of deals in our online Gilbert House store, and that includes hats and T-shirts and mugs.
Oh, yeah. Thanks to our friends at Light Hive Creations, our good friend Kenny C. and his fiancée, Gidget Manning. Thank you. T-shirts, hats, mugs, very, very well done. These are done by hand. These are not like mass-produced, so you order them, they're made essentially as needed.
Baked fresh that day.
Yeah. And what's really wonderful about it is not only does it help support us, but Kenny is a music teacher, a music educator who teaches kids. And a lot of his students come from families where they don't have the resources to buy guitar or a keyboard or what have you. So the proceeds that he gets, he's got his Facebook channel monetized. So you click on his funny memes and he gets a little.
They don't give him much anymore.
No,
he used to get quite a bit for that and really helped buy a lot of instruments, but you know how Facebook is.
Yeah. Oh, it's a Christian thing? Well, we'll just demonetize that, or we'll shadow ban that. But the sale of and he's also now doing merchandise for our good friend Doug Van Dorn and his Giant Steps podcast.
For Skywatch
TV. So when you're buying those hats, shirts, mugs, what have you, you're helping Kenny buy instruments for his students and sharing the gift of music, which is truly a blessing. And, both of us love music. Both of us have sung for many years.
Oh, yeah.
Sharon, professionally, me, hobbyist, but still, I mean, when I'm winding down in the evening, I'll dial up the Barbershop Harmony Society's YouTube channel, watch a couple of quartets singing a cappella. Love a cappella, doo-wop, love gospel quartets. The human voice, opera. I mean, not my favorite style of music, but I can appreciate the artistry and the emotion that flows through the voice. This is what Kenny is sharing with his students, and your support through hey, put on a Red Wing Saga T-shirt next, and go to the bookstore and say, hey, these are really great.
Get a great coffee mug. Yeah.
There you go.
Boy, if only you had this book in your. Oh, sorry. I guess Sharon doesn't want to put her book here.
Yeah.
Well,
anyway, you'll find it at
fine. No.
gilberthouse.org/store. You'll find the link on the front page. Look for Kenny's smiling face with a GHTV shirt, and that's the link that'll take you to Light Hive Creations.
And by the way, while you're at the store, gilberthouse.org/store, take a look at our specials. This month we've got that amazing Gates of Hell special.
Yeah, our book is out. It's going to be officially released this coming week.
Yep.
At
we've
Amazon.
got copies.
But we've got the books here, and when we send them out, they're signed.
Yep.
We sign every book that goes out from our store, and you can get it shipped right away. Again, Amazon will have it later this week, the Kindle version as well. So if you want a Kindle version or an Audible audiobook, you can get those at Amazon. But and we've got the link at our store. So if you go to the link at our store, we've got the Amazon links there for in case you want the audio version or the digital version. gilberthouse.org/store. Take advantage of that special.
And while you're there, also go to /travel because you're going to get all the information regarding our future trip to Israel. We're praying we don't have to postpone, but if things just are still not safe a few months out, we'll change the date. Yeah. And if it doesn't work out for you, Lipkin Tours is really good about refunding.
We will likely make a final decision on the tour of 2025 in December.
Yeah.
Because about 90 days out, I mean, that's really getting close to making travel arrangements. And there are still, as of this recording in October, there are still airlines that are just really reluctant to fly into Tel Aviv. So we understand that. But Lipkin Tours had to accommodate a lot of groups that wanted to come in 2020 and 2021 and 2022 and had to delay. And if you can't accommodate the new dates, they will refund your deposit. So if you want to hold a spot, you can do that at no risk if things change and the new dates don't work for you. So gilberthouse.org/travel.
The poor reputation of King Arthur is just getting besmirched all over the place.
Oh.
You and I went to one of his supposed burial sites, and it's actually this, and there's a tomb there, and a monument. And okay, there are other places that claim him too.
Yeah, Glastonbury is where we went.
Glastonbury Tor, yeah, exactly. That little town that was full of all sorts of Harry Potterish sorts of things.
Yeah. We saw people who clearly viewed themselves as practitioners of the arts.
LARPers.
Or LARPers, one
Live
or the
action
other.
role play.
Yeah. Either way, but yeah, there were a lot of stores there selling occult books on the main street in Glastonbury. But the tomb of Arthur was at the church there was just suddenly discovered around, was it the 11th century AD when monks realized the church needed repair, and so suddenly they found a tomb and said, "Oh, it's Arthur!"
Yay!
And suddenly people were making pilgrimage and offering donations, and that helped save the church.
But also there is a spring there that has appears to be some sort of iron oxide aspect to it because it comes up reddish like blood. And so it is supposed to be the Holy Grail that Joseph of Arimathea stopped there with it, and sort of some of the blood seeped out, and it still is there, and it's turned the water magical.
Mm-hmm. We saw some people there at the spring that were really...
It's a beautiful little garden. It's just...
LARPing.
Oh, sorry. Yeah, exactly. Well, this story about Arthur is making this one town feel like they're really important, I guess. But the claim that Arthur went into a market town of Rusin and wore a woman's clothes because he was actually in love with another woman, a real woman, and he was in disguise. Now, there really are not too many stories about this. I'm not sure what sort of esoteric source was used, but supposedly when he was dressed up, a rival, Quail Ka, Koreans, made fun of him. Yeah, made fun of him because Arthur injured his knee as he was dancing in the women's attire so he could get close to his love interest. So I don't think he's LGBT. He was just LARPing.
Yeah.
He was pretending to be a woman so he could get a woman's attention.
Mm-hmm.
Well, I think some people today are actually LARPing when it comes to that sort of thing. But it's a sad thing. I do think that. Yeah.
There's a lot of history that is being rewritten to try to tell a narrative. I mean, we're supposed to believe that within the last couple of years, stories come out that claim that Abraham Lincoln was gay. That because he had a good friend that. But this is a very old thing. We're King David, and Jonathan. Their
They're
friendship.
Not here to defend themselves.
Right,
you can say whatever you want to. Jonathan thing.
Yeah. 12th century, by the way, is when that tomb at Glastonbury Abbey was found.
By the way,
there was a fire that had destroyed some of the buildings.
That's right.
Yeah.
Hence the fact that it's just a shell of its former self.
Mm-hmm.
One of the things that I meant to mention is today is October 12th, which is actually Columbus Day.
Yeah.
And yet I've seen very few stories about it today.
Good point. I'd forgotten about that until you just mentioned it. Is it even mentioned on the calendar come Monday? I mean, Apple's holiday
Discovery
thing.
Day. Yeah. I don't know what it's called these days. But since when did we combine Lincoln and Washington into President's Day?
Yeah.
Because when I was still in grade school, we celebrated those separately.
Right.
12th of February for Lincoln and the 22nd for Washington.
Yeah.
And we colored the little things.
Too many presidential holidays.
To this day, I can still smell the mimeograph fluid on those little copied papers that we would color when I was in first and second grade.
Well, I just tapped the official holidays on the Apple calendar here, and we learned that this coming Monday is, in fact, Columbus Day. It is also Indigenous Peoples Day, which is a new thing that was created to try to offset Columbus.
Here's my thing. I have no problem with that. I think the indigenous people of the Americas it's about time they had some sort of recognition as a day.
Yeah, got really a raw deal. I mean, look, we Americans look around the world and we start, condemning, well, how dare you try to colonize, blah, blah, blah. It's like, the Native Americans raising their hands like, excuse us.
And I would even say just about every civilization has raised its hand at some point and said, we were conquered by the fill in the blank.
Right. Yeah, I think the American Indians would have something to say about unrestricted immigration.
Oh gosh.
Yeah, understand. But there's even a convoluted history there when you read history of the early colonial or pre-colonial, early colonial period and the post-colonial period here in the United States. One of the reasons that the American Indians were not able to withstand the influx of European settlers is because they were fighting with each other. So, yeah, it was, and the same is true of the Celtic tribes when the Angles and Saxons and Frisians and Jutes and Franks came in. They were fighting with each other as much as they were fighting against the immigrants. So
it's happened over and over throughout history.
Right. Yep. Well, what else here? CBS News telling its reporters in some guidelines here and how they're supposed to report on stuff that Jerusalem is not in Israel.
And where is it?
Well, they're not supposed
in
to
Missouri?
say. Don't just pretend it's not anywhere.
Because there are some religious groups that claim it's up in St. Joe, Missouri.
Yeah.
Oh, sorry, that's the Garden of Eden.
Yep. That's
supposed to be up there.
The Free Press reports that this guide from CBS News management to its reporters, this was actually in August. Senior Director of Standards and Practices. Standards and Practices.
Oh, no. Okay,
a guy named Mark Memott, CBS News, sent an email to all CBS News employees reminding them, quote, be careful with some terms when we talk or write about the news, end quote. And one of the words on his list was Jerusalem, quote, do not refer to it as being in Israel, end quote. He continued in this note that went out to thousands of CBS News journalists, quote, yes, the U.S. Embassy is there, and the Trump administration recognized it as being Israel's capital, but its status is disputed. The status of Jerusalem goes to the heart of the Israeli-Palestinian conflict. Israel regards Jerusalem as its eternal and undivided capital, while the Palestinians claim East Jerusalem, occupied by Israel in the 1967 Middle East War, as the capital of a future state, end quote. So, therefore, CBS News journalists are not ever supposed to refer to Jerusalem as being in Israel. This has been a policy of a lot of Western news organizations for as long as I can remember. I thought, and I confess, until 2019 or 2018, when we went there and visited, but, at that point, 2018, I was like 56 years old. All right. Should have known better. I thought Israel's capital was Tel Aviv.
Really?
Because the news media here in the West, whenever it refers to, there's a practice a lot of journalists will use. When they refer to a nation, they will use the capital of that nation. Okay, Washington says blah, 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 blah. Moscow replied blah, 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 blah.
Yep.
When referring to Israel, they always would say Tel Aviv, blah, 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 instead of Jerusalem. Imagine my surprise when we got there in 2018, the year that our embassy moved, the 70th anniversary of Israel's independence, and found that all of the government functions of Israel are in Jerusalem.
Yeah, the Knesset's in Jerusalem.
Knesset's here, Supreme Court is here, the Prime Minister lives here. Well, why do they keep saying Tel Aviv? Because the Western news media is anti-Israel.
Yes.
That's what it comes down to. And this thing in August is just the latest indication of that. This CBS News directive, don't say Jerusalem is in Israel. It's ridiculous. It is laughable. The Israeli, and this is why the world keeps using the term West Bank.
Yes.
To refer to Judea and Samaria. It's because that was the West Bank of the Jordan River, which belonged to Jordan until the 1967 war. Israel captured it. That's when Israel captured East Jerusalem, basically pushed the Jordanian army back east of the Jordan River. And in 1988, the government of Jordan formally renounced its claim to Judea and Samaria. And yet the world for the last, 35 years continues to refer to it as the West Bank.
It's a spiritual thing.
It is indeed. It is indeed.
It is a spiritual thing. Well, before we went to break, I promised you at the top of this that we were going to tell you why our week has been interesting. And is it okay if I talk about this?
Sure. Yeah.
It began, I don't know, maybe a year ago.
18 months ago.
Okay. When you started noticing that it was just your feet tingled.
Really began.
Your toe, yeah.
Looking back on it, it really began when we were in Israel last spring of 23, because there were days, and I remember telling you about it then, especially I noticed it when we were at El Ahwat, that there were, as we were walking,
location.
rugged location, we're walking, and it felt like my feet were being stabbed, my toes, specifically, pins and needles, but really painful. But it would come and go. And now looking back on it, I can see these were the nerves in my toes saying, that's it, we're giving up.
Well, yeah, and it occurred to me that, you and I had talked about this several times since that first, when you first noticed it, that I have paresthesia, which is the result of shingles, and I said that's feeling things in your nerves that makes no sense, like pins and needles.
Right.
And I said, you really need to talk to your doctor about it, and I think you did at one point, but it was sort of dismissed as well. You're probably just
old guy thing. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, finally, you went back this a few weeks ago.
I visit my doctor every 6 months because they've been tracking my thyroid levels for years.
Right. Me too.
Yeah, because I've got hypothyroidism, low thyroid.
Right.
And so they've been tracking that, and I've been taking thyroid replacement. For years. My mother had to deal with it as well. She had hyperthyroidism.
Yeah, she had to have hers removed.
Yeah. So anyway, my this is part of the ongoing maintenance, and it's kept me healthy. They tweaked my thyroid, and things have been good. And we've been in 2015, when we realized we were going to get priced out of the insurance market thanks to Obamacare, that we needed to get healthy, and because we realized we couldn't travel and do the things that we wanted to do if we were continuing to carry all that extra weight.
Yeah, with Skywatch TV, we really wanted to get better. So we both got healthier.
Right. So anyway, 6 months ago, mentioned it. The doctor was like, well, let's see. You're not diabetic. You're not an alcoholic. Those are the main risk factors. So
you don't smoke.
You don't smoke. So it's probably just an old guy thing. You're going on 62, and so no big deal. So 6 months go by, I mentioned it this time and was very insistent. This is getting worse. The first 3 toes on both feet feel half numb all the time. I've had to change my gait, the way I walk, because I can't always feel when my toes, if I don't lift my feet enough, I can't feel when they're beginning to drag. And I've done this a couple of times. Yep. And suddenly, by the time I realize that my toe is caught on something, it's, I'm pitching forward, and it can be really painful. So the nurse practitioner at the doctor's office took a look at it, said, your feet always this color? Because they were kind of purpley blue. They were cold.
Yeah.
And I said, well, yeah, when they get kind of cold. Well, she pressed on it, and it took a while for them to return to color. She said, that's a vascular thing. So this was on Monday. So they said, we want you to go and get a CT scan and an ultrasound. And as they were scheduling it, they say, no, we want you to do this tomorrow. So I had to drive to Springfield.
The order was marked stat.
It was marked stat. Yeah, this wasn't like, okay, when you get some time in the next few weeks. No, it's we want you to go tomorrow. So I had to go to Springfield, which is about an hour from where we're at, a little less, for the one scan, the CT scan, and then had to drive down to Branson for the ultrasound because Doppler imaging. Good news is they found I'm not pregnant.
Oh,
so that's
hallelujah.
Good. Yeah. Because they couldn't get me in the same imaging center on the same day for the scan. So anyway, so I spent all of Tuesday basically driving around, and turns out they on my way back from Branson, I got a phone call from the office of a vascular surgeon. Said, yes, you've been referred to us. I'm like, vascular surgery? Why? Well, I'm not sure, but they want us to schedule an appointment for you as soon as possible.
And so you had to go on Thursday of this week.
Right. And they wanted me to go in on Wednesday, but Wednesday we were shooting all day for a couple of documentaries that are forthcoming, one for Skywatch TV, one coming from us. we'll tell you more about those as we get closer to release dates. Both of those, I think, are going to be pretty
Yeah, I know. They
powerful.
were really fun to do.
Anyway, so I got in on Thursday, and the vascular surgeon said, okay, what we found are two what are called saccular aneurysms in your left iliac artery. The artery...
that descends down your right hip.
My left hip.
Oh, is it your left?
Left hip, yeah. And the aneurysms are relatively small. One of them is about 2.6 centimeters, and the doctor said the surgeon said that one is clotted off, so it's not at risk of bursting. The other one, 2.4 centimeters, is not. He did say that there's some calcification, hardening of the artery on the outer wall of that one, so it's at low risk. The size is also at very low risk for bursting.
Hardening of the aneurysm.
Yes.
Not of the artery.
Not of the artery.
That's different.
Yeah. So the aneurysm, because of the size and because of the hardening of the wall there, very low risk of bursting. But this is the kind of thing that if it does burst, according to what I've read, and the doctor concurred with this, his words were, it would be a coin flip if you made it to the hospital in time.
If you knew that very second, we couldn't get to the hospital.
Exactly, especially where we live out in the country. But even living in the city, the mortality rate when one of these bursts is between 33 and 50%.
Yeah, the pressure in an arterial space is pretty high.
Right.
And you bleed out very quickly.
Right. So.
We don't want that.
No. And I told the surgeon this just because, I'm thinking, cost-benefit analysis in my head.
Yeah, because you don't have Medicare yet.
Right. And Sharon is, covered by Medicare, so our expenses there with her are very manageable. But for me, we've just been very blessed that I've been healthy for the last 8 years. And
I know many of you out there listening, if you don't have insurance through your workplace or you haven't reached my age of Medicare eligible, you also, many of you I know, are in the same boat, because when everything changed from private to supposed...
Yeah.
Yeah.
You can keep your doctor if you want to.
No. And it was extremely expensive.
Yeah. We priced it that first year, and because of the income bracket we're in, and we're not getting rich by any means, but we, according to their calculations, we were just past the cliff where we could have gotten
paid for
government subsidies to cover most of it. We're not touching anything. We would have been out $27,000 a year for premiums and deductibles before anything got paid. In. So I'm like, why would we pay $27,000 a year? I mean, if we suddenly come into a situation where we're billed that for a hospital, the hospital will set up a payment plan and we'll take care of it that way.
And they give a discount for self-pay.
Yeah, and that's the other thing. The self-pay discount is about a third with the hospital group up here.
So bottom line is you're going to have surgery. Coming
November 8th, yes. Friday, November 8th, I go in for surgery. And they will put in essentially a stent. It's not exactly like a stent, but it is something that will go in and replace the inner wall of the... it doesn't replace it. Actually, you're sliding a sleeve inside the artery.
You're shoring up the artery in case...
Right, so that blood is bypassing the aneurysm, and so that artery is not at risk of bursting. Obviously, there's some risk anytime there's surgery. As my dad once wisely said, a minor surgery is a procedure on somebody else. So, but I'm not concerned or worried about it. They'll knock me out, so I won't have to be awake. I had hoped to make it through this life without having surgical implements inserted into my groin, but sadly, no. My dad had an angioplasty.
There are guys listening to this right now that are going, ah!
Yeah, exactly. My dad had an angioplasty after a heart attack back in 1989. And, procedures have improved since then. There have been new developments. Yeah. So he said that he had to be strapped flat to a table for like 18 hours while that was just in case when they reinflated the artery with the angioplasty, the little balloon, that they had to go in and do it again. So
it's much faster now.
It is faster.
Even 25 years ago, I observed it when I was studying medicine or pre-med, and it, I think, was over and done in an hour.
Yeah. Well, according to the surgeon, I will be flat on my back for about 4 hours. So that's not too bad. And I suspect I'll be anesthetized during part of that time. So we're
telling you all this to let you know that we appreciate your prayers. And specifically, if you can pray that all will go well between now and November 8th, and of course that the surgery itself would go extremely well, and the recovery, because the recovery is 2 to 6 weeks, depending upon what the activity is. 2 weeks to do pretty much very little, and then after that, you have to be careful. But we neither one of us, we had even talked about this prior to your visit to the doctor, and prior to the diagnosis. You and I had been saying to one another that, I don't fear death. It's just going to be with Jesus. I mean, come on, who doesn't want to go there?
Yeah.
And neither do you. It's just that we want to do all the things the Lord has called us to do. We want to work.
Yeah. And I think both of us feel the same way, that leaving the other one alone in this world is something that neither of us wants.
Exactly.
I will fall on that grenade. If you go first, I would prefer that you go to be with Jesus first, and I'll carry on until the time he calls me home. I don't want to leave you here alone.
I will tell you this. I have no fear of that either. Whatever the Lord has in mind for us, I'm ready for that, because he has been so incredibly wonderful, protecting us in circumstances that we didn't know exist, like this barn nearly burning down. We didn't even know it. Things like that the Lord has been there supernaturally protecting us. And I know if you are listening to this now that there have been times in your life where the Lord has supernaturally protected you. So it's really easy to it's really tempting to go through life and worry about the things you see ahead.
Yeah.
And instead of trusting in the shepherd that you're following, that he's going to take care of that. Not only those things that you see ahead, but those things you don't.
Yeah. And you pointed this out, which speaks to, I shared this with Eileen, who watches Grace and Glory on a regular basis. She's Aunt Eileen. They love going to visit Aunt Eileen, and she watches our dogs when we have to travel. She'll be watching them while we're up in Springfield, as I'm getting the surgery in a month. Had we proceeded with the solidarity mission that we had planned for early November, we would have been in Israel on the date that my surgery is now scheduled for. Had I not mentioned the neuropathy, and according to what we saw in the scans, or what the doctor saw in the scans, there's not a lot of restriction of the blood flow to my feet. It's a little unusual that the aneurysm is on one side, but both feet are feeling it. They said, okay, well, it's possible that the aneurysm that has clotted over could be obstructing blood flow, and my body is compensating, but there's a speculation that it could be that the body's compensating for the restriction, and that's why both feet are whatever. But had I not mentioned it and said, look, this is really becoming a nuisance, can what can we do about this? It's not just an old guy thing anymore. And God bless the nurse practitioner for saying, I think this is vascular, go get these scans. We would not have had the solidarity mission anyway, had I not mentioned it, and that solidarity mission had been ongoing. We could have been overseas when something had happened.
Well, exactly. And these aneurysms are often silent.
Yeah.
And you only know about them when it's too late.
Right. So the Lord allowed for this to be detected before it became an issue, because we were looking for another problem. Why are my feet tingling? Oh, you've got this other thing going on here that we really need to address pretty soon. Now,
I will say, he did prescribe something for neuropathy, and that seems to be helping.
It does. It kind of mediates the symptoms. But I just want to emphasize again that the size of this aneurysm is such that, based on what I've read, doctors say they've never seen one this small that has ruptured 2.4 centimeters. In fact, there are countries like Japan that don't even recommend until it gets to bigger, 3 minimum, but usually 4 or 5 centimeters, which is when they're at risk of bursting. So this is really an early stage intervention to prevent it from getting to where it might become an issue. And I would rather take that risk. I mean, anytime there's a surgical procedure, there is a risk. There's a risk with the anesthesia. There's a risk of infection. There all kinds of things. But I'd rather take that risk than the risk that it goes and then suddenly we're on the clock. And even if we get me to the hospital right away, could be, and it's not because I'm afraid of what would happen if, because as you say, I mean, okay, as a Christian and a believer in Jesus Christ, he's gone ahead of us to prepare. I'll see my dad again.
I know.
I'll get to meet your dad.
I know. You'll see Tom again. And Mike.
And Mike, yes. And many other friends who've gone on before. Rob Skiba, Chris Putnam, your mother. Yep. So that doesn't, I'm not afraid of that. No. But just want to work as long as we can to share this hope that we have in Christ.
Yep.
And so that's what this is all about. So if our work schedule gets a little inconsistent over the next 4 to 6 weeks, this is the reason why.
Yeah. It very well may, depending upon what all you've got some other things scheduled that have to be done, blood work, things like that. Yeah, EKG, another scan. Yeah. Right. So it's hard to say what's going to happen, but I know many of you are dealing with health issues of your own. And that's where you can ask for prayer. If you have already downloaded our app and if you've not yet chosen to join the conversations in that little forum area, it's just top right of the app. You'll see 2 little balloons like talk balloons. Go in there and you can sign up for various areas, prayer requests being one of them. And I have noticed that there's a huge community in there. And we asked for prayer for Derek in that area and wanted to bring it up to you, not because we're whinging. It's because we know we are called to minister to one another, to pray for one another. And we want to pray for you as well.
Yeah.
So if you have something going on that you just really want, if it's nothing more than just, I need to get this off my heart because it's so hard to deal with on my own, go in there and talk about it. Yeah. Make some friends. It's a great virtual congregation.
Right. And we've seen a number of people in there who have done that. And, I won't mention names because I don't want to call anybody out, but there are people in there who have become virtual friends from other sides, Australia, all over the United States, people lifting one another up in prayer. And that is really a blessing. So, of course, they found out about this earlier this week. I put that out there as in the prayer request section of our little app, just asking for prayers. And I thank you for that.
Will you be putting this on Facebook at all?
Yeah, probably.
Okay.
Yeah, because I know we shared it out there. We shared it. By the way, we keep forgetting to mention, we've got Telegram channels out there. So you can find us on Telegram.
I just got over 200 subscribers as of this morning. I think it's at 204 or something now. So thank you for subscribing to The Armored Sheep.
Yeah, it's in the notes below. If you're looking at us, whether you're watching this on YouTube or listening on any of your favorite podcatchers, check the show notes because our links to our Telegram channels, there's one for Gilbert House Ministries, there's one for the Armored Sheep, there's one of you from the bunker, and we share a lot of news items there and a lot of things that we're doing. So this was already shared on our Telegram channels. And I'll be putting it up on Facebook.
And by the way, thank you also for your kind feedback, your kind words about the Armored Sheep. You guys have been really sweet. Thank you.
Yeah, that was very,
and it didn't scare anybody off. The great thing about being able to do a podcast or anything like that video without any makeup on, boy, that saves time.
Yeah, it does.
Saves an hour out of the day.
That's why I never put any on. Yeah,
I think that's best.
Yeah. I grew the beard. Cuts down the amount of shaving by 57%.
We come to
we do have a question. Yeah, got a question here. Wendy has asked a 2-part question, and boy, we tackled both of these. We could go another half an hour, so let's limit to the first one. The area they call Gaza and want to be a state for the Arabs was known in Jesus' time as Palestine. That's got a question mark after it.
Part of it. There were Palestinians that lived there.
Yeah, and then she asks, how do we talk to those who want a 2-state solution? Thanks. Gaza is a very ancient city. It was a very important port during the time of, even in the pre-Israelite era. Canaan, when the Canaanites controlled it. Gaza was a port city. It was used by the Nabatean Arabs of Petra, who became very wealthy because of their control of the spice road, the spice trade along the caravan trail that came up the west side of the let's see, I'm going to think of a map here. Was it coming up the west side of the
modern day a lot?
Yeah, the Arabian Peninsula, because it brought the spices from the southern part, what is now Oman and Yemen, and brought it up to the area north of the Red Sea and the Gulf of Aqaba, so Aqaba or Eilat, and then it came through Petra and then cut off to Gaza, and then was shipped to the Greeks and the Romans. So the Nabatean Arabs became very, very wealthy, which is why Petra is so awesome. And a similar site down in Saudi Arabia that is likewise got all of these wonderful buildings carved into the sandstone.
Gaza was beautiful at one time.
Gaza could be a Monte Carlo of the Eastern Mediterranean, because the climate is like San Diego, meaning it's usually around 80 or 85, and it's got beautiful beaches and the sea. So you could have, I mean, not that we encourage casinos, but you could see developers putting resorts there in Gaza and making a ton of money for the people who live there.
But their religious mania, the terrorist religious mania, was more important than the people.
Economic development and the people who live there. Yeah. Gaza could be a really, really wealthy enclave, but they've chosen to serve the dark god. Want to talk about territorial spirits? This was the area that under the Philistines was controlled by Dagon, their chief god. Well, Dagon, in my book, The Second Coming of Saturn, you'll see is the same entity known as Molech, El, Kronos, Saturn, child sacrifice. Okay. Shemiyaza, who led the rebellion on Mount Hermon and who comes out at the end as Apollyon and Abaddon.
And they worshipped a version of Ishtar.
Version of Ishtar, yeah. In fact, even into the Christian era, there was an aspect of, or another name for Dagon called Marna that was worshipped as late as the 5th century AD, prior to the Islamic invasions in the 7th century. So this area, it was not called Palestine.
No, you're right. The Romans called it that, Palestina.
But not until after the Bar Kokhba rebellion in the 2nd century.
Yep.
So we're talking 100 years after the death and resurrection of Jesus, when Simon Bar Kokhba led a rebellion that kicked the Romans out for a couple of years. Then the Emperor Hadrian got his best generals, a couple of legions, went in there, crushed the rebellion, and deported about 900,000 Jews, and said, we're not even going to call it Judea anymore. We're going to rename it Palestina, which was based on the name of the Philistines who lived around Gaza. So no, it wasn't Palestina in Jesus' time. It wasn't until a century later, and it was only changed because of the Bar Kokhba rebellion. So how do we talk to those who want a two-state solution? Diplomatically, but the fact is, because of those who control the Arabs in that region, and the fact that Islam says if it was once Muslim, it must always be Muslim, there can never be a two-state solution, because the second state, this independent Palestine, will exist for the sole purpose of eliminating Israel.
I think one question to ask a supporter of the two-state solution would be, and how will that fix things? If there were two states there, how would that bring peace to the region?
Yeah.
Because the terrorist organizations would still exist.
Yeah. One of the things, and this is one of the documentaries that we worked on this week. This will be coming out later, either later this year or early next year, depending on how long it takes us to produce it and put in the film and the B-roll and so on. In 1947, when, well, I kind of go through the stages from 1922 in the League of Nations Charter. The League of Nations, which was the predecessor to the United Nations, the League of Nations failed. United States was never part of it. The League of Nations Charter, like their constitution, included an article that said there would be an independent Jewish state in Palestine.
The original one did.
So the League of Nations Charter originally said that the Jews would get a national homeland in what is now Israel and Jordan. And then they changed it. That was in the 1919 charter. When it went into effect in 1922, they said, no, okay, only just west of the Jordan River.
Yeah.
And then as the Arabs who lived in the region, even though they'd gotten independent states because they'd been under the rule of the Ottoman Turks for about 400 years, got independent states in Jordan and Syria and Iraq and, oh yes, Arabia, which is where they're from. They wanted that little strip of land west of the Jordan River too. And so they began committing acts of terror against the Jewish settlers. And they outnumbered the Jews there first like 5-1 and then 2-1 by the time of 1947's UN vote.
The settlers who, by the way, had bought the land.
Who bought the land, right. So...
And paid a high price for it.
Yeah. The British had been given what was called the mandate, the British mandate to administer the land until such time as an independent Jewish state could be set up, which happened again in 1948, May 14th. The Brits had originally said, okay, we will administer the League of Nations mandate. Israel, or the new state of Israel, will be everything that today is west of the Jordan River. But then as the Arabs started getting violent, and then oil was discovered in Bahrain, Kuwait, Saudi Arabia, and British Petroleum wanted to get its hooks into that and make a lot of money. Suddenly it's like, okay, well, maybe we can divide the land and give part of it to the Jews.
This is actually a really deep subject, right, to understand the background behind this and the frankly treachery that was taking place.
Yeah.
You've got a video that they could watch now. The presentation you gave in Ohio.
I don't think that's open to the public. The one that I did on our trip to Israel, it actually kind of goes into a little bit of it at the beginning.
Well, whichever it is, if you've got, just for now, if you're interested in this topic and you want to learn more, our dogs are in the house right now, and I worry about them, not the house.
Right.
I'm worried about them because right now they're in the crate.
Gotcha.
They're used to sleeping in the crate overnight, but not necessarily here.
One sentence to finish this up. The bottom line was this, that the Arabs were presented with this plan in response to their violent opposition, and they rejected it. They said, we're taking all or nothing. So a two-state solution, they were offered a two-state solution back in 1947, and they said, no.
Which is why I say we'll change nothing, because they want it all.
Exactly.
They want, basically, river to the sea means bye-bye.
Eliminate
all
the
of
Jews.
Jews.
Right. That's what it means. So that is how we discuss this. Just go back and look at the history. They were offered the two-state solution almost 80 years ago, and they rejected it out of hand.
Exactly. So those college kids who are chanting river to the sea without even knowing what they're saying are unknowingly calling for genocide.
Yes, that is it. So, Wendy, thank you for your question.
Very good, Wendy.
We'll take part 2 of your question tomorrow morning during the Gilbert House Fellowship.
There you go.
So, until then, I'm Derek Gilbert.
I'm Sharon Gilbert, and for Grace and Glory, who are, we'll see what they've been up to. Bye-bye, everybody.
P.I.D. Radio is produced by Gilbert House and released under Creative Commons Attribution Non-Commercial No Derivatives 4.0 International License. Follow us online, Twitter @P.I.D. Radio, or the P.I.D. Radio page at Facebook. Join us each week for our online Bible study, the Gilbert House Fellowship, online at gilberthouse.org.